So there've been a lot of videos lately about morality and whether or not we can have an objective moral system or if all morality is relative. Um, and I've been reading this book by Charles Taylor. He's a Canadian philosopher called A Secular Age, and it's quite relevant to this. It's the basic premise of the book is to explain or describe the transition in what Taylor calls the social imaginary from 1500 to the year 2000, and those are just rough dates. A social imaginary is the sort of unconscious assumptions that a society makes concerning existence, what's the good life, um, things that we can't necessarily build a theory about or logically map out, but that we assume are true without giving it a second thought. Um, an example of this would be equal human rights. Today, in the year 2000, everybody pretty much agrees, aside from a few extremists, that every individual person is created equally and they are or should be afforded the same rights as every other individual, regardless of race, regardless of social status, wealth, family name. All of that is irrelevant. Whereas in 1500, there was a certain social hierarchy in place, which held that if you're a king or if you're part of the nobles, the noble class, then you have more rights than peasants and serfs, just because that's the way God had designed the moral order and the universe. So I think back in 1500, we might say that there was an objective morality, or at least there was a moral system that everybody agreed in, because everybody believed in the uh, Christian biblical account of creation and of how people ought to behave based on the Ten Commandments and other moral precepts in the Bible. And there wasn't much room to escape that. It wasn't as though Christianity in 1500 was one belief system among many that people could choose to align their lives with. That was what there was. That was the full, complete, finished version of the cosmos. And whether you were a king, a noble, or a peasant, you believed in this. Um, it was part of the social imaginary of that time. Whereas today we still have believers, people who take uh, the Bible seriously, but they are, at least Taylor argues, a different kind of believer. They now Believers today realize that there are many other options that other people can believe in. There are many other options that other people can choose which don't involve any belief at all. And so there's been an explosion of possible perspectives today, and it really, in some sense, causes some moral chaos because whose moral system is right if there are so many perspectives to take? It's very difficult to say that there is such a thing as an objective system of morality today. I mean, certain basic precepts, like what I mentioned earlier about human rights and equality, most people in civilized nations take that as an aspect of what may be an objective moral system. But when we talk about a system, though, we want more than just the general rule that all people are created equal. That's a good guideline to start from. Uh, but the problem seems to be applying this system to all situations. I mean, you run into certain gray areas. At what point does my right as an individual to express my own needs and seek my own happiness infringe upon some other individual's right to express their needs and seek their own form of happiness? Um, you know, there's the war on drugs. Should I be allowed to get high in my own home? Uh, there's gay marriage. Should people be allowed to wed whoever they may be in love with, regardless of what society may think about it? There's abortion. There's a good issue. You know, I can't take a side on this. As heated as those on the pro-choice and the pro-life side can get, I cannot align myself with either side because I just see both perspectives, and there's no moral rule which gets us out of this dilemma. And yeah, women have the right to choose what happens to their own bodies, but at what point do we draw the line between when the child is an individual with its own rights? It seems to me, yeah, it's an arbitrary line, but when are we going to draw that line? I don't know. I don't know. There's no biological line to draw because we have to decide when the child becomes conscious. And we don't even know how to measure consciousness in full grown human beings. So it's difficult in this type of situation to assign an objective moral rule to the situation. But the fact that most people, we do live in a secular age today, and we do take certain moral precepts seriously without the need of there being a God who laid down the rules for us to follow. We use reason and rationality to figure out how best to organize societies so that everybody can maintain their own equal rights. And in some of the cases which I've mentioned, these gray areas, certain moral rights become infringed upon because society is still working to define what exactly it thinks is right and wrong. But since 1500, to say that there is such a thing as one objective moral system, it has become more and more difficult. Certainly, a group of rational people could come together and agree on many specific moral rules, you know, the golden rule, for example, equality, for example. But there are many specific situations in which those rules no longer do the work that we would expect them to. So, yeah. Is there an objective moral system? We're working on it. We're working on it. And I said in another video response about morality to Kim, existentialist cat, that there seems to be a requirement for some type of transcendental awareness in order for there to be such a thing as an objective morality. There was that transcendental God in the Middle Ages, which allowed them to say that this book, the Bible, has all the rules that we need, and if you disobey these rules, well, in some cases, we're going to kill you. It's good that we've moved beyond that. See, that's the problem with an objective system of morality. If you take the rule as an absolute truth, you risk injustice to the individual person in a specific case, which can always be subsumed by a general rule. I mean, I'm the kind of person that thinks it's the spirit of the law that should count and not the law as it is written itself. What was the law designed to do? Not what does the law say literally, because the way that we word the laws may not apply to this new situation, which was not foreseen when the law was written. And as rational human beings, we should be able to transcend the letter of the law in favor of the specific situation. So we can't have this transcendent source of objective morality the same way that we had it in 1500. It needs to be somehow different. I mean, rationality may be enough as long as it's based on love or empathy, the sense that my well-being is no more important than anybody else's well-being. The self-interested morality can also be construed as rational, but I don't see it that way. I think self-interest oftentimes leads us in the wrong direction. I'm more for an empathetic, rational morality based on love and collective well-being as the final good rather than my own self-interest. But yep, let me know what everybody thinks, and thanks for listening.